We'll make a start. All right. I te whānau, we have Dr. Hinemoa Elder no Ngāti Kuri, te raroa, te aupōuri, ngai takoto me Ngāpuhi. Hinemoa is a fellow and Royal Australia and New Zealand Colleague of Psychiatrists and a specialist in child and adolescent psychiatry with over 2 decades of experience. She's also Kaiārahi at Oranga Hinengaro at Te Hiku Hauora, Deputy Chair of Te Runanga Nui o Te Aupōuri, and Deputy Chair of Te Hiku Iwi Development Trust. She's a highly celebrated author as well, and you're obviously most likely familiar with her Pukapuka Aroha, Wawata, Dēmoko, Waitohu, and one of her latest, Te Ara, a Māori guidebook of the mind. Each of these carrying ancestral wisdoms into the spaces where it is needed the most. A true embodiment of our hui atau theme today. Her kōrero is entitled Tūpuna Tools in Action. So i te whānau, we are in for a treat from the beautiful Dr. Hinemoa Elder. I'll hand it over to you, Iho.
Te kawariki, te kawariki. Tiro tiro kaunoa kei hea te iwi nona nā tapua e whaia nei. Rere whakate uru atu ki te tihi o whangatawatea. Mā te one e hai ai e poroa hioi paharikau I reira. Huri whakate rāwhiti atu ki pūheke. Mā te moana arangunu me ona pioke e. Hioi kaurikau I reira. Uana te mata ki muri. Ki te waipu a tātau o pārengarenga. Ki te ara karere kore ke muri. Ki te whakatōrere tango te wairu. Ko te reinga e. Tēnā te kauriki. Me whakapakarere. Kia ora, nā mihi nui kia kuku katoa e ngā hau e whā. Rauranga tira mā. Nō ku te whiwhi, nō ku te honore ki te kōro tahi tātou e pāna ki tēnei kaupapa ko te oranga tonutanga te iwi te kaupapa matua neha. Kia ora everybody. It's a real thrill, a real treat to be part of this amazing kaupapa from Toi Tangata and to share just a few practical thoughts that I hope you will find useful. So as Charles mentioned, I am from the north, from the far, far north, the naughty norther, as we say, and Ngāpuhi. That must be my sensible side, I suppose. And I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist, and I'm a mama. And so I thought I would just illustrate that practical tools are all around us all the time. And our tūpuna, our whainga, very smart people, resourceful people who have left us clues which we can gather up and utilize to help us with the complexities of modern life. So muri whenua, always start there. And I love to introduce myself using that whakataukī about using the device of a manu. It's a common way that we can fly together through the power of Hinengaro. You didn't know, but you just went on a bit of a tiki tour around muri whenua. So we went to the top of Whangataotea and we looked down and we saw poroa drawing a line in the sand. You know, there's a great kōrero around. This land is going to be for Pōuri. That land is going to be for Te Raroa because of his wife's bravery in protecting the body of her relation. And then we flew over to the other coast. We went up to the top of Pūheke, Te Pū o Te Wheke. And I don't know if any of you have ever been there, but it really is an octopus. And you stand up there and you can see the ridges of the tentacles reaching out into the moana and into the whenua. And from there, we look down on Rangunu Harbour. We always think about the pioke as people from like Takoto. We might be a little iwi, but we have a powerful, shall we say, influence. A thrust of the tail of the pioke, the dog shark, creates a powerful current. And then we went right up the top to the Parengarenga Harbour, where the waters are pristine. And we went to the place where the whenua leaps off and swims away. And so that defines me in that evocative, poetic way of describing ourselves, which our whāinga have left for us. So the magic of the creativity, I suppose, is what I wanted to exemplify right from the beginning. That practical tools don't have to be boring or dull or kind of, a grind. Practical tools from our culture are exhilarating and joyful and uplifting. So, as I said, they're all around us. This mātauranga, this is not some sort of, I'm not a tohunga. I'm not speaking about esoteric knowledge. I'm speaking about everyday, general things that we can draw into our everyday lives, which come from our whakapapa, which come from the taiao, the natural world around us, and come from our stories. So we're people that come from great storytelling traditions, and I always encourage whānau that I'm with, for whatever reason. I might be working with them on a healing journey or recovery journey to reclaim or discover and embellish and refresh and enrich stories that they find helpful. So maybe today you will start to think about, oh, what are some of the stories that can help me in whatever I'm dealing with at the moment. So the magic of local is also something I'm really big on. We all come from these sort of niche places. As you've seen, the places I come from, Te Kao is a pretty niche place. So we know that the very specific knowledge that is located in those areas has its own sweetness, has its own relevance to all of us. So I'd also encourage you to think about what's super relevant to you in your neighborhood, in your neck of the woods, in your valley, in your community. And so what I've written here is that, this sort of perspective of the local stories of the lives, the places, the people, the perspectives that come from our little corners of the universe. These, I think, enable us to draw on the very deep sources of healing and recovery that are specific to where we come from. And it's really interesting to me, in like the books that I've written, as Chelsea kindly mentioned, they're very specifically Māori, and some of the things I write about are very specifically from the north. And yet I get a lot of feedback from people from all over the world saying how much that local knowledge has influenced them and resonated with them as global people. So that's another interesting thing to reflect on. The other layer to this, of course, is that we are part of our environment and the environment is part of us. So when our lands and our oceans breathe, so do we. That kaitaki relationship, that reciprocal relationship, that aroha to aroha mai, I like to put it around that way because it's about offering the aroha first rather than wanting to receive it first. When you put out aroha, it comes back to you. So I think about that as a real fundamental layer when we think about the resources that are available around us all the time. So, as I said, what are some local stories, local pūrakau that you might like to explore already, that you might already have cooking in the back of your mind? I thought I'd better start with this okoro. So this is a very specific okoro from Aupori, from Ngāi Takoto, from Muri Whenua, that one of my relations put together in 1969. Teddy Jones, he just left Kaiārahi College, and Ma Jones, some of you will know, and Heck Busby, also a very famous man, called Teddy to draw this. And they had a whole lot of information on bits of paper, and he described it to me. He said, look, they just said, okay, boy, you're going to put these pieces of paper in the circle. You're going to do it like this. And this is what he drew for them back in 1969. So we call this an okoro. We don't tend to use the word maramataka in the far north. So that's something interesting. And essentially, this illustrates many things, of course. It illustrates the names that we give to each day of the month. So I'm fascinated by this idea that, yes, we can use numbers, but we have a different relationship with the day when we know that the day has its own name. Numbers are a bit harder to have a relationship with by themselves. We might like certain numbers because it's the day of our birthday or the day of another important event. But actually knowing the names of the days and the names of the different kanohi that Hina shows us, Hina, our Māori moon, that's the name we have in the north. These create their own opportunities to think about what Hina and what our tūpuna are offering us by telling us these things. So as you can see there's a lot of emphasis, quite rightly, on planting and gardening and fishing. And I love that. I'm a keen gardener myself, but I'm also really interested in the emotional tides that Hina is affecting throughout the month. And so that I wrote a couple of books about that. And I thought it might be interesting for us to think about today, what today's moon is saying. And you might have already heard something about this. But according to my calculations and my use of the okoro, today is huna. Today is a huna moon. And so for me, I always think about the breath on huna. I always think about the first breath, me aro koe ki te ha o Hinemoa Elder. Think about that first breath that came from Hinemoa Elder and all the stories that resonate from there about the cave of huna, actually. Huna has a cave, and cave's a bit of a theme of interest to me. So this is a time for real noho puku, for reflection, and also for wānanga. So how fitting that we're having our wānanga today, especially at this time of year, ne? At puanga Kaiārahi. So that might raise some other opportunities for you to think about. How can you use the okoro, or for you in your area, it might be known as the maramataka, and you have your own iwi's names and stories related to the different places around as Hina takes her orbit around Papa. So I'd encourage you to think about your relationship with Hina, our moon, and what resources you could create for you and your whānau, or for your team at work, in your community, thinking about Hina's influence. One of the other things I just wanted to mention that I think about when I think about Hina is her relationship to Papa. So when you think about Hina, she's kind of like Papa Tuanuku's bestie, because she's orbiting around Papa, and she always shows her the same face. She's always predictable, she's reliable, she never turns away from Papa. So I think that's another interesting element to the relationship between those of us who are uri, na uri or Papa Tuanuku, and our relationship with Hina. So yeah, that's kind of some of the points on that slide. So you can come back to that slide later and think about bringing forward the resources of our lunar cycle each day and each night. Okay, so this is a grove of Nico. And so this was a way to remind me about another resource. So we have lots of really amazing whakataukī and whakataukī where I'm from, and this is one. This is one that I really love. And he tāpui Nico is a short, concise summary. We love to summarize things in te reo and in te ao Māori. We love to give little clues. Iti te kupu nui te whakaro, that kind of vibe. It's very much us, isn't it? So it comes from a longer whakataukī from one of our Ngāti Kuri tūpuna. Anō ko te tāpui ni ko te e tuana I o Tōtope. So o Tōtope is a place not far from Mitimiti, actually, over those ways. And so this rangatira, I thought it was useful also sometimes to think about when were these people alive? You know, so this chap was alive back in around 1625, we believe. And he likened a group of other young leaders to the grove of Miko palms that were growing in this place at Ototope. And so I asked permission from our kaumātua at work, because every morning we start the day with whakamoimiti, and we have a whakataukī, and we have waiata, and we talk about the moon. And I asked them if it was okay if we use this shortened form of this whakatauaki as a name for a group that we could start. And they agreed, which was very kind and generous of them. So thank you, Uncle Bundy, and thank you, Papa Tom, for allowing us to bring to life this particular saying. And I think that's another important element of developing practical tools, is checking in with our kaumātua and our puia to make sure that we're on the right track. I always make sure to check in with our old people, because I know that they'll tell me no if I'm not on the right track, and that's very important. So we set up this group every Friday for anyone working broadly in mental health and addictions in the Kaiārahi area. Because when I first went home to work at Te Hiku Hauora a couple of years ago, I could see that there were so many people doing different things with different contracts, both inside our organisation and in the wider community. And I could really feel that we needed a home base to come together, get to know each other, and to have whakawhanaungatanga, just have a cup of tea and a kai. And that way, weave our work and our relationships together to guard against this tendency for, beavering away in our own little patches according to the name on the front of the building that we work in. And it's proved to be great. It's proved to be really effective as a living embodiment of this he tāpui nika idea. And so I wondered whether that might be something that some of you watching or listening might find helpful to latch on to something that really is meaningful for your local area. An example from nature that has its own story, maybe, ideally where you know who the originator was, so you can draw on your whakapapa links there. And then you can utilize that to keep those ideas alive, because that's what they're designed for. And I think that's how I find their relevance lives on. So that's another living example of a practical tool that might help you to discover something like that for yourselves. Okay, so here's another example. Te pūrangi. So this is a very special little flower from a bush that grows only in muri whenua. And this bush grows in pretty harsh conditions, and also is found where there's been some disturbance to the whenua, say a landslide or some erosion. And so this is a really tough little plant. And when we were starting a new offering, a new approach to reducing the harms of meth in the muri whenua region, we had been looking around for a name for what we wanted to do. And this also speaks to another part of developing practical resources, is going back to what's already been described before. So what I remembered was that actually in 2018, a group of us got some money from the Ministry of Health to develop a program for meth harm reduction in Te Kao. And we were given the name at that time of Te Puarangi. And so that's from one of my cousins, Errol Murray, and our mātanga reo from the Kāinga, Anaru Ripa, and they gave us this name. And so that contract lasted for a couple of years, and we had a wonderful nurse, Barb Larson, who was the kaimahi for that mahi at that time. And then, like many things, unfortunately, that we have to contend with in Te Ao Māori, that contract came to an end, that money came to an end, and that stopped. And so just like the plant, the season for that Te Puarangi went into a kind of dormant phase. And so then at Te Hiku Hauora, just earlier this year, when we had the opportunity to get another contract, I remembered that we had this previous contract, even though it was in a different moment in time in a slightly different place, although not too far away. And I thought, wow, let's bring her back. Let's bring back Te Puarangi. Let's remember the previous iteration and all the people who were involved in Te Puarangi, because that's part of the whakapapa of actually what we're trying to do now. And so I thought that might be another useful tip or trick to think about for people watching, to think, well, you're interested in a kaupapa, make sure you go back and collect all the material or the stories that you can find from people who've been trying to make changes in that particular area before, because no doubt there will be plenty. And so that's just another important learning that I've been reminded of just in recent months, that we are not the first ones to be trying to make things better. We are working in the footsteps, like Tu Matahina, we're walking in the footsteps of those who have gone before. And so let's not forget those ones who actually did the hard yards back then, and keep those stories moving forward. And then hopefully after we finish our work at this time, well, we're going to do our best to get rid of meth completely from the whānau, and we will hand that kaupapa on to some others in the next chapter. Okay, so then I thought I could tell you a little bit, share a little bit about the Nārua or Hinengaro. So I've recently written a book. I can show you what it looks like, called Ara, that Chels mentioned. And this came from an amazing, I don't believe in coincidence, but an amazing opportunity that happened in 2008, where a group of us cousins were on a road trip actually, and we were going around to visit some of our relations in the Urupa, as you do. And we went to visit some of our living relations too. We went to see Pātate, and we went to see our wikaira whānau in the Hokianga. And so we turned up, and we were sort of given this impromptu wānanga by Mr. Hinemoa Elder and his son Shane. Kind of out of the blue, they said, right, sit down, ladies, we're going to have a wānanga. And so they gave us the names and the meaning behind the names of these 23 caves. And these, we were told, are the places where Hinengaro has curated and created these places for us to travel through on this very specified journey for the healing of our minds, for discovery of the things, the resources, the answers, the questions that we need at any given time. And so this is an illustration of my interpretation, really, of that list that we were given at that time. Because it seemed to me that while rua exists within papa tuanapu, and caves, these naturally occurring series of caves, are taking us down to the deepest point, which is called Te Whatu Manawa, the bowels of the earth, the seat of emotions. And I was very inspired at that time by a number of things. Takarangi was one, the double spiral with the internal, with the kind of infinity into infinity, negative space and positive space. And also by our pupu, harakeke pupu, korare, pupu, hakarongo taiwa, the sort of spiral. So I imagine that we're like little grains of sand traveling through the chambers of these beautiful creatures' homes, as a way to find answers to some of the terrible complexities in the world that we're living in at the moment, how to cope with things. So that's just a tiny little touching on the caves. I mean, people at the end might have questions about that, and if we have time, I'm happy to talk more about that. So this is another classic saying that many people will be familiar with, a classic whakataukī, right? And I love this concept of the hapai o. So people will be familiar with the hapai o is it has a couple of layers to it, right? So the hapai o is the snacks also. The o is the kai, the timo kai. And yeah, so this is the idea of the amorangi ki mua, the chief, the boss, and the hapai o, the workers in the back, if you will, is one way of looking at it. So again, ask permission from our kaumātua at work if we could use this as our what would you call it? Our name, but also our kind of call to action in primary mental health at Te Hiku Hauora. And so I work with a nurse, Matiro Blair, who's from Te Raroa, from the Hokianga, and we are the primary mental health at Te Hiku Hauora. And one of the things that we do is we use this tool. And so this tool is another practical tool that you can use, and you're welcome to use this. So these slides will be available to you guys. And I'm happy for anyone who wants to use this. So as the hapai o, Matiro and I see ourselves as really we're the legs of serving the needs of the whānau. So for us, the amorangi ki mua, that's the whānau. Those are the people leading us, leading the work that we do. And so we're there to facilitate the oranga, or the journey towards some sort of state and experience of oranga of the whānau that we work with. And so we use, one of the things we use is this tool here, Te Wakakuaka, again, comes from the north, comes from home. The original genesis of this tool was my PhD and postdoc. So initially, this started off as I was really interested in exploring what does it mean for Māori tamariki mokopuna when we have a brain injury. As a child psychiatrist, I spent a year at Starship in the final year of my training, seeing a lot of our mokopuna Māori with brain injuries, traumatic brain injuries. And there was no resource for that, which I found odd. It was like, well, hang on, he tapu te upoko. This is a very sacred part of the body, and there's lots of reasons perhaps for that. We can talk about that if you want to. Often the first thing that's born into the world, the first part of the body that's born into the world. So I could see that there was no kind of off-the-shelf cultural resource to help our whānau understand and navigate that pathway of healing when there's a tamariki who's had a brain injury. And so I thought, oh, well, it must be my responsibility, because at that stage I was the only Māori child psychiatrist in the country. So coming into that role. So I went home to Te Kao and I asked our kaumātua, look, is it all right for me to do this research on the brain and injuries to the brain and the head? And so they gave me the thumbs up. But Uncle Glass Murray said to me at the time, as classic, they said, "What's in it for us?" And I said, "Well, we can create our own tool that we know comes from home, and that's a resource for our whānau." And he said, "All right, but you may have to keep bringing it home." That was what my responsibility. Like, okay, Uncle, absolutely, will do. And so I have continued to do that. So over the years, I went around 9 different marae around the country, guided by the old people at home and other kaumātua who were part of that journey. And I had 2 wānanga in each of these marae. And at the first wānanga, I said, look, tell me all your stories about brains and heads and brain injuries and anything you want to tell me about that. And what was fascinating was that people had a lot to say. Because I wasn't too sure whether people were going to have anything to say about this kaupapa, but they did. And so I made sure to be in marae, in towns, Ngā Hauewha marae, as well as iwi marae, and ones that were rural, remote. So I had a good mixture in my methodology. Professor Tar Mason Jury was one of my supervisors. Chris Cunningham was one of my supervisors. So I was very fortunate to have such great people on that pie for this kaupapa. And so I went back again to each of these 9 marae, and then I said, so this is what I think you told me the first time. Did I get that right? This is another way to build practical tools, right? To just check in. Am I on the right track? It's another way to do it. And is there anything extra you want to tell me now that we're maybe a bit more warmed up? So they very generously shared all of this material. And then I wrote that up and then I sent it back, and I made a video of each of those wānanga, and I sent it back to each of those marae as a koha to say thank you, and here's your own information back. And then I wanted to create some tools from all of that information. And so by a series of different strategies, having smaller wānanga with whānau who've had brain injuries and who've had disruption to their well-being, their wairua, their psychological health, I was able to identify a sort of a theory, which was a kind of ambitious idea, really, when I think back at it, which was that an injury to the head is a cultural injury because the head has a specific cultural status. And so when you have a culturally determined injury, you must respond culturally. There is a cultural response that's indicated. So that was an interesting idea that I sat with. And then I realized, well, actually, the fundamental injury is about wairua. The fundamental disturbance of this physical traumatic brain injury is actually about disruption to wairua. And so I started writing about that, and I wrote some papers and book chapters and things about that. And then out of all of that, I wanted to create something really practical that people could use to determine, well, actually not only in a brain injury, but to anything that disrupts the wairua, which could be a really horrible experience, an unexpected experience. And in this case, we use this tool fundamentally at the moment for whānau where there's been a difficult experience around the birth of the child, around the birth of a baby, of a pepe. And so, because that can affect all the people. So that comes back to one of the other things I discovered in creating this practical tool was that a brain injury doesn't just happen to one person. It happens to the whole whānau. And so just like when a baby is born and something unexpected happens, it doesn't just happen to the baby or the mother, it happens to all the people involved. Even people who weren't in the room are affected. And so that's what Matiro and I use this tool for now. So as you can see, we collect some information at the beginning, and we always give the whānau back their copy of this tool so that they have their own record of their own information. And then basically they're asked to agree, strongly agree, agree a bit, disagree, strongly disagree. So there's only 4 chances. There are 4 options. It's something I learned about making measures. Is you don't want to have a neutral measure in the middle. So you don't want to have a not sure. Right? I can see Chelsea nodding. She's been part of these sorts of kōrero before. So that's another thing to think about when you're creating practical tools for your mahi. Think about, this kind of structure could be helpful, and to avoid having that neutral option. So essentially, we use this as a tool for a different kind of whakawhiti kōrero. So oftentimes when people are coming to see a psychiatrist or a nurse or any kind of doctor, they have expectations about the kind of conversation that's going to go on. And so what I've had feedback about this, and what I've experienced around using this tool, is that it allows a very different conversation to happen. So people don't feel so highly defended. People don't feel so highly anxious. Because let's face it, I'm the least favorite specialist that anyone wants to see. Nobody wants to see a psychiatrist if they can possibly avoid it. And I think that's normal. It's unfortunate we live in a world where people like me in my job are still required. I would love to live in a world where I'm redundant and you don't need psychiatrists anymore. So I'm also working towards that. In the meantime, we have some practical tools that come from whakaro, from marae originally, from these different places. And as you can see, it's a bilingual tool. So the first section is about te wā. So there's 4 different sections, and I'll just whip through these. Time, place, tangata, and wairua. I mean, it's all about wairua, really, as you can tell. So I'm just going to check my time, because I think am I doing okay, Chelsea? Yeah, okay, 5 more minutes. All right. So we use this. Interestingly, I know we do have some mātanga reo here in our rōpū today. So interestingly, I found across the different marae that I went to that everyone talked about our reo and the vibration of our reo being really important. And in the context of any wairua disruption, needing to discover healing, so that the reo was essentially a rongoā. And that it didn't actually matter if you couldn't understand the reo, the effect remained strong. So I do find that the invitation of those statements at the end of that section invites a really rich kōrero, because it's something that a lot of people haven't thought about. But once they get into it, they really discover some things and some potential that they hadn't considered before. Okay, so I think this is one of my last slides. So I thought another really practical thing that everyone can do is write your own whakataukī. Easy. So one of the great things about whakataukī is, well, you'll know it's a whakataukī because you wrote it, right? So we all know the difference. Whakataukī, we don't know who wrote the saying. Whakataukī, we do know who wrote it. We know the originator. They are short. They are designed to be pithy, nuggety, observations, perhaps warnings, which are designed to be easy to remember and paint some sort of vivid picture that's meaningful, that will make people go, aha, yes, indeed. So you'll all have your favorites. I mean, one of my favorites, it's been my favorite for a long time, is E kitea ai koe ngā paongo te moana me māku koe. If you seek the treasures of the ocean, you better get wet. You're gonna get wet. You've got to get stuck in. You can't be, faffing around expecting to have some great revelation without actually getting involved with something. So for me, that's a great saying about action. Try something and you will find out something more, and then you can try something different. So that's just me. That's one of my faves for many, many years. So here we just have the letters of the word aroha to help us remember. And I have written this in te reo. Hopefully my reo is okay. Kawiti, just feeling a little bit nervous knowing that you're there. I think it's all right. So you can see that, write your own whakataukī. You could even do this in 5 minutes after this webinar. So, me aro koe. Me whai wā, ia tau te noho ki te aro. So you're going to look for something that makes you feel good, that, is something is kind of uplifting. And that's the a part. And then the ra part is me rere. Get your thinking into what's the tino āhuatanga, spelling mistake, sorry, o te taiao. What's something about the taiao, the natural world, that really, that you can choose that really is helpful to you, maybe. And the or is a little bit hidden here, o te puna kupu. Oh, I'm so sorry, I've made a few spelling mistakes there. So you're going to find, search for kohi kohia etahi kupu mea tahi tianga, search for some words and phrases that really exemplify the saying that you want to create. And then he hanga, he ritinga, you're going to make the thing, you're going to make the saying that you like. Just aware that maybe some people on the webinar, you'll all be at different stages of your real journey. And finally, the final he aha, ngā akoranga e tau atu tēnei whakataukī I tēnei wā tonu. And then maybe you'll start writing more whakataukī. You might decide that that's something you like to do more of. I think it's just a really it's a nice shared activity to do as a whānau, to have fun with. Like I said at the beginning, developing practical tools doesn't need to be dry, doesn't need to be a chore. It can actually, the process in itself is as important as what you discover. So just going into the rua I te whai whakaaro, which is one of the rua that we were given in that beautiful wānanga back in 2008. And that always reminds me that, when we're given taonga tuku iho, when those things are handed on to us, it also, what comes with that is a huge sense of responsibility and care and caution, and thinking, how do we honor that amazing gift that we've been given and hand it on safely and carefully to the next generations. And that's always something to be very careful about with our taonga. So keeping that in mind, think about the magic and power of local. For us, I like to think of it as te hā a muri whenua, and that's for me about that action of breath of muri whenua. She's still living, breathing. She's a living, breathing area. She's a living, breathing whainga. And that breathes life into what we do and who we are, because these practical tools really, they're also invigorating our identity. And we know that our identity as Māori is a key element of our well-being and our oranga. We know that our solutions are here in the community, often hidden, often a big part of my work in mental health is helping whānau realize that they do have the solutions within their whakapapa, within their whānau, but they just couldn't see them themselves. And it's also about joining up. So, you know, this wānanga that we're part of over these 2 days that Toi Tangata has put together is about community. We can never do this by ourselves. We must do this with others. And that's a key role of Toi Tangata. So very grateful to you all for putting this amazing conference together, or huiapo together. And that means that we can have more effective involvement in the wider determinants of oranga and be political, because everything we do is political. And so that's why voting this year is especially important. That's a very practical tool that we need to take on board e te whānau this year in particular. So I encourage you to create daily activities, simple things, small things that add together, that woven together really make us feel good, protect us against feeling upset or stressed when things don't go quite according to plan. And that's about using those local mātauranga, the okoro, pūrakau, whakataukī. So our whānau have already done the hard work, and it's just up to us to follow their lead. And there's our beautiful Oniroa Tohe. So we're really following his lead, you know, and he was the great one for naming all the things. So thank you so much for having me today, and I'm really happy to answer any pātai. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou, o tira kia tātou.
Ngā mihi nui kia koe.